the UK, the European Union, Australia, Canada, the collective West is fully subordinate to US corporate interest because they're rolling over the debt-based Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
They have access to the financial industrial complex tools. They can create a currency war if they want to destroy your wealth. They can laden you with debt, which they can roll over. They can use intelligence and military in order to destabilize your country, turn genuine riots into color revolutions, take away somebody that represented the people and install a dictator that takes the corrupt money in order to privatize all their resources and make sure that Chevron, Exxon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, JP Morgan, the IMF, all can come in and use your country as an asset management portfolio. So most people, when they hear this, they think, is this some kind of organized cabal? It's actually not. It's a ruthless game of betrayal at the top, power dynamics and access to capital, and you can throw people off the network and then operations go wrong. It's a ruthless game.
Right, Simon, how you doing, man?
All good, Peter. I think last time we spoke was with, we were either in Hong Kong face to face, and then we did a podcast with Bill Barheit, I think.
Hong Kong was first.
Yes.
It's strange that this is the first time we're doing this in person.
Yeah.
After all these years, it's not even a Bitcoin joke.
Yeah, that's wild.
I'm sure we're going to talk about it. Actually, I've just seen the prices up, back over 90k.
Okay.
It'll dump 5k again shortly.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I was listening to this Dominic Cummings interview on the Spectator Gove's show, and he was talking about the complete dysfunction of the state, the absolute dysfunction of the state, why nothing works, why everything breaks, and why nothing can get done. And there's like half of me is that it's just a dysfunctional state, and then half of me must be some vested interest somewhere in that this doesn't work. And whilst that happens, all the poor and the middle class just get poorer, and there's a group of people with yachts. Like, I don't know what's going on. Tell me.
Yeah. Okay.
Where do we start?
All right. Well, let's maybe do some structural things, and then we can look at the big issues in the UK. But I think people have a very misguided understanding of what I call power dynamics, like who's making decisions, and what is the role of the state and the government. From all my research, the state and the government are a battering ram to take blame for the fact that they are a piggy bank in a Ponzi scheme that needs to reallocate finance to where their lobby wants it to go.
Okay.
So what does that actually mean? Well, firstly, you start with the monetary conversation, which is how we first met, which is that the pound and fiat currency is fundamentally a Ponzi scheme. What does that mean? That every single pound that is created, it started with a $1.2 million loan between William Patterson and the King of England. And that loan was a perpetual loan that had perpetual interest. And they gave a monopoly on the creation of the pound to the private banks, which the Bank of England was at the time. And so with that structure, which is exported globally around anyone that subscribes to this model, you have a problem. Where is the money to repay the interest if every pound is a debt? And you soon realize that, well, the money to repay the interest doesn't exist. And so you have to find someone else to take on another loan in order to repay the interest on the money that doesn't exist. And so structurally, that is how the pound is created, how the dollar is created. And so you have a number of consequences to that. The first is you treat every consumer as an asset. You try and get them in debt. You treat every corporation as an asset. And those corporations, they can either get access to 0% loans, which is at the highest level of power, the closer you are to a central bank, or you're a small business and you pay you don't get a loan for a start, because they'd rather lend it to the consumer for a house that isn't going to run away. Or you pay the highest level of interest, whether it's 30% on a credit card or a payday loan at the consumer level. And so the corporate debt market is really for the highest levels of power, and the small to medium-sized enterprise doesn't really get the loans unless they've got some kind of cash flow type of thing. And then at the third one is the most obvious one, which is the government. Mm-hmm. And so when the consumer goes bankrupt, you restructure it and put it on the government's balance sheet. And when the corporate has significant influence and significant control, they tell the government how to spend the money when they take on the debt. And so you end up in a situation where people think that what we have in the West is capitalism, but what we actually have is socialism for the corporation that can get the cheapest interest rate and access to the money printer. And the rest get capitalism, but that capitalism is fundamentally in a game where we have this concept of the K-shaped economy. And the K-shaped economy means that if everyone's trying to take on the debt and roll over the debt, then most people lose that game, because the people that can access the 0% money can leverage that money to get the assets, and the rest become an asset because they go deeper and deeper into debt. And because this scheme is structured as a Ponzi scheme and the interest doesn't exist, the rich fundamentally become the class that own the assets, and everyone else just becomes the assets that's paying all the interest.
Right. Hold on. This is so interesting, because on the way over, I was listening to Tucker Carlson, and he was doing an interview with Adam Marblestone. Is that it? Is that Adam Marble? No, sorry. Apologies. Doesn't even say it's gold, crypto, and the debt crisis, and how to survive when the US needs a bailout. Who's the guest? Hold on, let me just try and get the name of the guest. Anyway, but this guy, he's a guy who does sovereign debt refinancing and trades sovereign debt. And when he was explaining it, he was saying, well, we go to a country, we speak to the people who manage their debt, and we speak to the IMF and when they're going to get the next tranche and, the likelihood. But he's like, but they always get the next tranche. That's the business of the IMF. And so eventually they get that tranche, and we know they do. We help...
Coleman Church.
Common Church?
Coleman Church.
Oh, Coleman Church.
Yeah.
And he was like, and then we help trade their debt around the world. And I was thinking, hold on a second. So... And I'm only early in the interview, and I'm wondering if they cover this. But like my little simple brain was going, well, if they need an IMF bailout, they've obviously blown their country's debt. If they're on a second tranche, they've obviously blown that. And so, who keeps buying shitty? Like, who's losing?
Yeah,
where's the loser in this? Because somebody's got to be losing. If there's corruption at these third world countries at the state level where they're basically taking the money and just pissing it up the wall, and then they're getting another IMF bailout, who's losing?
Yeah.
Because someone's got to be losing.
Well, the answer is they only lose when you can't roll it over.
Yes.
And if you can roll it over, then whoever's receiving the interest continues to receive the interest. And inevitably, who receives the interest? Well, it's actually the bank that can create the currency. And so we have this separation between central bank and government. And right now we're headed into what is called a monetization phase, where essentially you're using the government to stimulate the economy. And you're trying to get you're trying to get as much debt out there as possible. In order to sell that debt, you can't actually go directly to the central bank. You actually have an investment bank that creates those products, those bonds, and then the bank is able to purchase them as a primary dealer in an auction. And you get a pretty complicated process, but in order to have it where you don't have the central bank buying directly from the government, you put the bank in the middle, and they have a license to create that pound. And so they actually create the money to purchase the gilt. And as long as the debt can be continually rolled over, And then you expand that out at the international level. And now you get into the real game of power dynamics. And the first thing to understand is that this system was created in England. So it's interesting that we're going to be discussing UK today.
Oops.
Because it was our creation. You know, we copied bits and bobs from Amsterdam. They had the Dutch East India Company, which was the private corporate interest. And then they had the Amsterdam Central Bank. But we created this loan mechanism to fund wars. And that was 1694. Now, once you have that set up, you need the government to continually take on more and more debt. And the way to do that is you need to try and get a productive asset at the end of that debt. Because you can keep rolling over as long as the government, as long as you're building your capital. And so the British Empire created this concept of mercantilism. And mercantilism was essentially, all right, well, let's create the best military industrial complex, the naval fleet. Let's create a private corporate interest, which was the British East India Company. Let's create a mechanism for the government borrowing the money. And then let's create a mechanism for funneling it back into the private corporate interest. And what would the private corporate interest do? Well, it would do colonialism. If it meant, okay, let's get all of China's silver, let's get them addicted to opium and build a bank called HSBC. Or let's go to India, let's steal all their gold, get all their tea resources, commit a famine, and make them fully subordinate to the British pound. And then we can use that as the base layer to continue the debt-based Ponzi scheme. But eventually, the corporate ends up with all the assets and the government ends up with all the debt. And so the end result of that was the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, this K-shaped economy, what we're experiencing right now. And then the corporate class, the investment banks, they go find another country to do it to. And in this case, it was America. So you had World War I, the Federal Reserve Act, income tax, everything repeated itself, what we did with the Bank of England. And what was after World War II, you had Great Depression, confiscation of all Americans' gold. You had a pump and dump scheme in order to redistribute the Roaring 20s, Great Depression of the 30s. You had World War II, and then you set up the IMF, the World Bank, and you forced the world because they had the manufacturing base, the military industrial complex, and all the gold that came from British colonialism, mercantilism, Germany's gold, Russia's gold after the Bolshevik Revolution. 75% of the world gold ended up, in the Federal Reserve. And it was the same people that were funding all of those, the Soviet Union, the creation of the Federal Reserve, the Reichsbank. The Warburg families were both on the Federal Reserve Board and the Reichsbank, the German central bank's board. And so you have this scheme that ends up with all the assets, and it always transitions to the corporate, the most influential corporates ending up with all the hard money and all the assets, the government ending up with all the debt, and then a new world order in order to reset where you're going to do the experiment next.
Right. But it's okay with the government to have the debt because they're not people as such, and it's great for the corporate interest to have the assets because they are people, essentially, at the end. Is that correct?
Well, again, it creates that K-shaped economy.
Yes.
So you've got a debt-based Ponzi scheme, a mechanism for getting the best access to finance, which is banking. In fact, the banks, they get to create it. The corporate class get it at the cheapest rate. And then you use that in order to control government. Government becomes the piggy bank. And then, the compensation is that they create some jobs.
But is this run by a group of lizard people, or is this just organically how it works? Like, what are the interests that know exactly what's happening and they're pulling the levers, or is it just an organic system?
I think it's changed over time and it's very fluid. So let's take the current iteration, which I would say, where are we today? The UK, the European Union, Australia, Canada, the collective West is fully subordinate to US corporate interest. Mm-hmm. And so our governments and our central banks are piggy banks And their job is the Bank of England and the European Central Bank need to find a mechanism for printing more money, and the leaders need to find a mechanism for spending that money. And that needs to go up to pump the US stock market and a little bit of UK and European stock market.
Because if it doesn't, and the US stock market collapses, everything collapses.
Well, it's because they're fully subordinate and in control by the lobbies. And so if you want to make it as a politician, you have to receive your lobby financing and you have to agree to what you're going to do for your corporate sponsor.
So is this when Larry Fink comes over and has a meeting with Keir Starmer?
Oh, absolutely. So, Larry Fink, again, he's not at the top of the chain. He's the manager of BlackRock.
Yeah.
What is BlackRock? BlackRock is today, I'd say, it's not as centralized as the Dutch East India Company or the British East India Company because they had a monopoly. BlackRock doesn't have a monopoly, but it has $12 trillion of assets, and it has a special relationship with both the US Treasury and the US Federal Reserve. So it provides, so during COVID, it was telling Treasury how to allocate the money. And during the great financial crisis, it was telling the Fed how to manage that process and which companies essentially BlackRock and JP Morgan should acquire, which one should go down, which one should go over, and what assets to transfer. That technology, like that BlackRock created, because it's got access to all the data, is used by most central banks, most money managers, many governments, many treasuries. And so through technology and the fact that it's managing about $12 trillion of assets, it's the most significant player in allocation of capital. And allocation, you then have, it's not the full thing because you've got State Street, you've got Vanguard, you've got about $30 trillion of assets. And then you've got the foreign sovereign wealth funds as well, which are countries that co-invest with BlackRock. But then you look at, and this is where we get to the power dynamics of today, and we'll try and bring it all back into like real things on the ground that are happening in the UK now. But once you have these asset managers, what are those asset managers? Well, they are the recipients of everyone contributing to their pension, everyone paying their insurance premiums, and all money managers, and that are essentially looking for passive investments. And so through this structure of these managed funds, like ETFs and various other products and unit trusts in the case of the UK, they get the ability to become the largest shareholder by holding your shares for you, for all the pension funds, for all the different pools of capital. And with that comes the proxy voting rights and the ability to put a board. And so BlackRock has 20,000 board seats across most of the public companies. Now, those public companies, they need access to capital because we don't have a free market stock market. Today, the state of the stock market today is that because we're at the end of a debt cycle, I would say in the US, which has consequences everywhere, the US, so you have these different pockets of corporate power, and I think this is where it helps people understand. Underneath those 20,000 board seats, if you want access to capital, you have to essentially have a relationship with the investment bank that made you public. And I used to work in investment banking, so I'm very familiar with how these different types of structures work. Most people think of, let's take Tesla, for example. They think of Elon as the richest person in the world that must have a lot of power. And to a degree he does, but the job of the investment bank is to make him subordinate to what I call a financial industrial complex, which is if Elon wants to acquire companies and grow, he has to get a loan from the bank and he has to co-invest with the Gulf sovereign wealth funds. And by borrowing against your stock and using that stock as collateral, the markets get to change the price of stock because they have access to all the products to manipulate markets. And so by this mechanism, you create the executives are kind of subordinate to their capital allocations and capital needs. And through this, you can manipulate many, many different things, like ESG was an example. You can dictate the flow of capital, saying in order to get this capital and to pay this rate, you have to do these following things and meet this score. And so this is the most powerful force, I would say, in the West, not the world, in the West. It's the financial industrial complex. It's access to capital.
Hold on.
BlackRock's the most important node there.
Okay, so I remember when he bought Twitter, large percentage of the investment came from Gulf states. And so, hold on, actually, we'll go back a step. So his subordination, is that through, rather than a tap on the shoulder, it's more like the rules of access to the capital?
Correct.
Okay.
So originally, like the early British American Empire was military industrial complex, had the most amount of power. Under military, you have what we call the deep state today, which is just the CIA, Mossad, all that type of MI6 power, because they get Pentagon budgets, the intelligence can escalate wars, and the military companies, their stock price benefits the more wars you can go in.
Hold on.
That's military.
So do you look at the Ukraine-Russia war with an entirely different lens than everybody else?
Correct, yes.
Explain to me the lens you look at that war through.
Okay. So when I look at the Ukraine-Russia war, I look at it as who is the ultimate power? Well, it's the financial industrial complex that represents the US stock market and US GDP. That's the current power structure of the West. Now, if you're BlackRock and you're managing your portfolio, then you're starting to think about some of the demographic issues in the UK, US, low birth rates, where the next profit's coming, all of these different parameters, which we can outline and go down right to the micro of how it affects us. But you have a spreadsheet of effectively managing these different demographical issues, geopolitical issues. And you say to yourself, right, well, what is the 10, 20-year plan? How are we going to manage this portfolio?
Our country is part of a portfolio.
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is what people need to understand. The West, when you install a Western central bank and you privatize your resources, your oil, those are the two requirements of an IMF loan. You have to take on excessive debt, you have to install a Western central bank, and you have to privatize your resources. Once you privatize your resources, you become a debt-based Ponzi scheme, and you take on US loan, the West, or the Brits, and now the Americans, or the American financial industrial complex, has all the tools they need in order to manage your country as an asset.
It makes me think, when you watch one of those like sci-fi movies, when the aliens come and they just like suck everything up that they want, all the resources.
Yes.
It just feels like that.
Yes, because they're rolling over the debt-based Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
They have access to the financial industrial complex tools. They can create a currency war if they want to destroy your wealth. They can laden you with debt, which they can roll over. They can use intelligence and military in order to destabilize your country, turn genuine riots into color revolutions, take away somebody that represented the people and install a dictator that takes the corrupt money in order to privatize all their resources and make sure that Chevron, Exxon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamic, JP Morgan, the IMF, all can come in and use your country as an asset management portfolio.
So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this. You can go and read the books. But the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian. So they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com. So if I was secretly planning a revolution in this country, a people's revolution, to get rid of the government because they're completely fucking incompetent, and maybe institute a new codified constitution, restore proper democracy back, am I going to end up arrested or killed, or there will just be another powerful force ahead of me?
Well, there'll be a multi-purpose operation. So the military-industrial complex and the deep state or the intelligence, they will find a way of infiltrating that and turning it into violence. And so they'll take what could be a peaceful process and start killing people and turning it into something that can be weaponized, a narrative. The financial industrial complex, they'll come along and they'll start planning what assets can we acquire on the cheap. So we'll put, if they're public companies, then we can do an M&A deal. We can profit from volatility. And if they're a private equity house, then we can buy it through a distressed vulture capital deal. So the more distressed your country get, the more assets we get to acquire and roll them up through M&A into the ultimate power structure, which is hosted on the US stock market. At the same time, the technical industrial complex, so there's these different complexes, they'll be thinking, okay, this is a great way to manufacture the algorithms and fear in order to get everyone on the technology we want them to be on. We can then progress our pre-crime agenda. We can progress our digital ID. We can progress our central bank digital currency. We can progress our stable coins. We can progress our, getting people at home using algorithms and talking online rather than talking in person. So they'll come up with, whether they create it or engineer it, depending on how conspiratorial you want to be, they'll weaponize it. And so you have a multi-pronged. And now what does Blackrock? They've got the military industrial complex, the financial industrial complex, the technical industrial complex. What else do they have? What else do they make public? The media. And so you can use your media as a tool to prop up the other portfolios. And when you want to crash markets, you use derivatives, you hedge your bets, you go and conquer wars. If that war fails or succeeds, you've got a strategy for both.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win, whatever. So this is a structure. So let's get back to that original question. How do I look at the Russia-Ukraine war? So there is a fairly sovereign country called Russia. And by fairly sovereign, I mean it's not a central bank that's subordinate to the Bank for International Settlements or any of those forces. You had a failing Soviet Union.
Yep.
You had Gorbachev that was there to manage the fail and transfer the assets over to the oligarchs and elites in Russia. Those oligarchs and elites were infiltrated in order to privatize as many of Russian assets, install a Western central bank that becomes a member of the Bank for International Settlements, and also privatize its oil. So what did Putin do? Well, Putin arrested the oligarchs, kept the nationalization of the oil, and then the media, and I'm not saying this is, please don't...
Putin isn't the good guy.
Putin's not, look, none of these people are good. They're acting in the interest of their own power structure in their own country. Now, Russia has a different power structure. There are oligarchs, but it is fairly sovereign and independent because it has its own, sovereign wealth. It has its own, it's not running massive trade deficits.
Own currency.
Yeah, it's got its own currency. And so when I look at that, right, so that's how Russia is. What else do you know? If you're a global institution like Apple, you're saying, well, I've got my factories in China. I've got my consumer by debt in America and the West. Eventually, is that consumption going to dry up because everyone's in debt? Where are we going to find our, where is the next market that we're going to be able to go to? And China's basically got its own policy and its own power structure. But let's get back to the West. What is the power structure of the West? So you've got Ukraine is 100% color revolution. Zelensky works for, I'd say he's aligned with the military industrial complex faction of America. And so what is his job? And so Keir Starmer as well. Keir Starmer, he's aligned with all factions. So we're just fully subordinate in UK. You know, we've had bad growth ever since World War I, essentially. And so Keir Starmer is fully subordinate to the financial, technical, and military. But his job is to create the narrative to send money over to Ukraine that then goes back into buying weapons on the UK stock market. But most of it goes into Lockheed Martin, General Dynamic, Raytheon as a tied loan. And then they structure it, and the collateral is done via the World Bank. And then Blackrock is essentially issuing the money with a government guarantee. And they can end up with the Ukrainian assets. So in the end, when you do this operation, you essentially do a color revolution. You install the leader that you need in order to do this operation.
A comedian.
Yeah, a comedian. You create a media narrative that backs up the justification. We're saving democracy. You have Nato, which is a sales machine for Lockheed Martin, General Dynamic, Raytheon, you know, all of the Boeing, all of the different companies. And their job is to increase the revenue of these military companies. And so Ukraine was the perfect way of doing that. You pretend you're defending democracy. You have a boogie monster called Putin, who's a good boogie monster, if you want one. And you start to have a bigger strategy. What is the strategy? Well, we want to fully subordinate Europe. That was the strategy. So the war between Ukraine and Russia was not a war between Ukraine and Russia. It was a war between the US financial industrial complex and Europe. And so you use your leaders, you install your Macrons, you install your Merzes, you install your Starmers, and their job is to create an acceptable narrative for the people of why you're stealing all their money and spending it on US corporate interest. And that's your job. That's the war.
Okay, so going down this rabbit hole, how much of this is conspiracy, and how much of this is you like, oh, this is just how it works? I know now.
Yeah.
Like, are you 100%? This is just how it fucking works. I know. I've seen it.
Yeah, I've spent 25 years on this, and I'd say I know.
You know.
What are my sources? So I read a book a week.
Yeah.
I've worked in all the industries. I've been in business. I've been in investment banking. I know how trading works. I've been in all of the 25 years of my life, did economics to masters, worked, doing monetary reform, trying to change the government, to change the system in the UK, left the UK because I tried to create a bank. So this is 25 years of my life of following the money. And it needed a couple of things to put the final pieces together. We needed WikiLeaks, where you can get all the declassified documents that you can use to back up, and many of the declassified CIA documents. So if you read a book, for example, Covert Regime Change, it will go through the 100 covert operations, how they fund terrorism, USAID is the mechanism, how they control the media, how you go back to corporate interests. You can find there's been 100 operations since World War II. And then they stop at a certain point because we're going to find the next set in 20 years from now. But this is, to me, 100% how the world works. And so, yeah, that's how I look at what is happening. So,
but the world therefore has to work on a basis of evil.
Because you could say profit maximization.
But if profit maximization requires you to start wars and send young men to front lines to die, to create demand from the weapons companies, it requires evil. Yes. And if it's a system that requires you to extract hope and opportunity and wealth from the large majority of people to trickle upwards and transfer the assets to the riches, it is evil.
Yeah, and I think everybody knew that the British Empire was evil, but they are just about to figure out that the American Empire was just as evil.
And so with China and the Belt and Road Initiative, is that essentially their version of this?
It's their version, but it's built upon a fundamental difference.
No, well, soft power, not war.
Well, they want to, so they have the world's manufacturing base.
Yeah.
They have partnership and access to resources. And they would like to find demand for their product. And so America and the British Empire's model was eliminate competition. Don't allow Africa to ever use their resources. We'll just steal it all. We'll create groups like M23, M13. We'll have proxies to steal all their resources. We'll create ISIS, Al-Qaeda in the Middle East. Whatever we need to do. And so the Middle East was fully, you can see it all around the world. China was a victim of it. They had their 100 years of shame. Their century of humiliation, which led to them coming up with this 100-year plan where they are now. And if you look all around the world, you'll see that the tactics that you find appalling, that are currently coming home, by the way, they're using the tactics on ourselves because they got another plan. They funded every genocide, every ethnic cleansing campaign. You can tie this to pretty much every war in the world over the last 100 years. And I did that exercise of figuring out what interest it served. But is it evil? Right. So I use game theory. I'm a bit of, in economics with game theory. In game theory, you have two types of games. You have an infinite game, which is where you can really think long term. That's what China's doing. And then you have a finite game. And what a finite game means is that you put a time deadline on an action. And so if you look at the US stock market, it is structured around 3-month games. You have to meet your goal in the next 3 months in order to gain access to the next level of capital, to have your stock price not destroyed, to gain access to the index funds, and to be on the right side of the money printer. And if you do what you are meant to do for the financial industrial complex, everything rolls and everything ticks. You get access to your passive index fund, you get money printing, and you get media that kind of gives you the narrative that's needed in the Financial Times. In US politics, you have a 4-year election cycle, which breaks down into 2 years.
Yeah,
midterm election.
Yeah.
So you have 2 years to prove your utility to your backers. And you need money in order to be in the game. You also have to be compromised. That's what Epstein was. You can't rise to the top unless you're compromised, because we need to mutually guarantee that all of us won't spill the beans on each other.
So there's compromise on everybody.
Compromise. The higher you want to go, the more compromised you have to be.
So
in this game,
it's part of the argument of why Trump has not delivered on everything he promised, is that he can't because of his backers.
Trump, in my perspective, doesn't control the Epstein files. The military-industrial complex and the CIA and those forces do.
But even Doge, to an extent, whimpered out. It was a useful exercise and whimpered out.
Doge was a data mining exercise because Elon is an important network of the technical industrial complex. His job, from my perspective, is to build the social credit score. That's what his job is. He's providing all the data sets for the social credit score. Under the guys, these people are DARPA funded. This is, CIA intelligence funded. Their business requires Pentagon budgets. It requires government funding. And he is leveraged to the eyeball, even though the richest man in the world, with his stock fully subordinate to the financial industrial complex. And so he has to do what they say. He has to comply. Trump is... if you look at his background, he made money in real estate in New York. That's the Jewish mob, the Italian mafia, the real estate tycoons. He was mentored by Roy Cohns. He was married into the Kushner family. The Kushner were the original Epstein blackmail operations, Charles Kushner, which Trump pardoned before Epstein. So there's always been an Epstein. It was Meyer Lansky, then it was Roy Cohns and Charles Kushner. Then it was Epstein, and there'll be the next one as well. There is no way in hell that one person could be as networked as Jeffrey Epstein was. That's a multi-century network of contacts. And he was manufactured into this Bear Stearns billionaire financier. His job was to compromise. And that's, I think, that's at the intelligence level, whether it's Mossad, CIA, MI6,
Maybe
Five Eyes. Sorry?
Maybe all of them.
Maybe all of them, yeah. But he would be serving US corporate interests. Now, remember, US corporate interests, they also go via these different corruption proxies. So if you want to do something that's really, really illegal, like a genocide or ethnic cleansing, then you use your Israeli proxy. And then the money comes back into, so you do the illegal shit over there. You have all these cybersecurity, AI, like surveillance technology, like Palantir's building genocide as a service in Gaza, occupation as a service.
Genocide as a service?
Genocide as a service in Gaza. What they are building in Gaza, have you not, if you read the plan of what they're rebuilding in Gaza, the Tony Blair plan, by the way, nonetheless, with Jared Kushner, funded by MBS Saudi money, it is going to tokenize the land into a shitcoin. It is building data centers for Elon. It is building the mass surveillance state, Orwellian 1984 nightmare. And Palantir, which is the company that's going to be powering it, and powered the genocide as a service, and the occupation as a service, and the integration into drones in Ukraine, and crowd control in Saudi Arabia during Hajj, and the pre-crime agenda in the UK, and the surveillance state across Europe that is monetizing and weaponized immigration policy in order to manufacture civil unrest.
So, okay, so let's talk about the immigration across Europe, because it's very unpopular. The scale of it is unprecedented. No government has seemed to want to or be able to deal with it, despite the fact that it's publicly unpopular. So this has been manufactured.
Yeah, so I mean, look, if you're looking, so firstly, all politicians are compromised and subordinate to this network, this financial industrial complex.
So should I, if I wanted to see it,
yeah,
and I became an MP, would I see it, or would I not realize I'd become subordinate?
You would be, firstly, you wouldn't rise. You'd need access to funding. Then when you need access to funding, you'd be hanging around with the different networks you need to hang around in order to access that funding.
But I'm known in Bedford. I could go as an independent.
Okay.
Have a chance of winning, throw a few hand grenades in.
Yeah. So at that level, you're probably not important enough. If you want to rise,
you got to do it in a party.
Then you're going to have to be compromised to get further up the chain. And they will compromise you. You know, Keir Starmer, if you look at, he was all connected to the sex trafficking with Julian Assange and various other operations. Like, you know, you can go back into, like, everybody has the compromise that they don't want to come out, and then they leak it out. And as they leak it out, that's basically saying stay on track to where we're meant to be going.
So all those stupid things I've done in my life are on a database somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using ChatGPT as a therapist, then you're creating your blackmail operation in your Orwellian 1984 future.
I've been conscious of that for the start. So beyond it calling me babe, I think we're kind of all right.
even X, right? We went from, okay, so we had COVID, we had censorship, and then suddenly we came back with the free speech platform X, right? So we watched Jack Dorsey, which you cannot run a platform like Twitter without giving intelligence a backdoor. You know, the network, you become Twitter because the network allows you to become Twitter.
Right.
You know, these are not organic things that happen. Like, these technologies are all DARPA funded, utilized.
You make a Faustian bargain.
Yeah. The theft is, look, you have this Pentagon budget. You know, the big beautiful bill Trump just announced. There's 1.3 trillion and a 5 trillion debt ceiling. And if your politician complies, they pushed that money up to your corporate contract. Palantir gets some, Elon gets some. And this is, you know, the gradual the gradual mechanism. And if you don't comply, you suddenly, Elon can come out and say, hey, Trump, you're on the Epstein files.
So I'm aware that Israel, I think, has bought 13, Israeli companies have bought 13 VPNs. And obviously my son's in the room and he doesn't watch pornography and I don't.
Never.
But if I was one of those people, or if Connor was one of those people who watched pornography, they probably have a database of that as well.
They probably do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They know exactly what you're searching for.
They know
Yeah.
exactly. I already know what you're searching for. Yeah. So so they've probably got a vast database of everyone's kink in the world as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a great way to control somebody.
Absolutely. This is the future we're walking into. Now, this is interesting because when you go through that natural progression.
Perhaps with a camera of your face.
Yeah.
The thing is, right, if all this is true, you can't fight it. There's zero way.
Well, then we get to solutions. If we want to go,
you just have to kind of play the game the best you can.
Let's come to solutions.
let's end on a white pill.
Because you know what it's going to be, and I know what it's going to be. We had the text conversation on the way, and I think I know what it's going to be. So when you look at Venezuela,
Yes.
basically they just want the oil.
Okay. So let's look at Venezuela. So Venezuela, firstly, it was subordinate to military-industrial complex, financial-industrial complex, IMF warfares, color revolutions, like the global South have been all subjected to this. And so in its current state, the most important thing is that Chevron and Exxon have control of the oil. They already do. They don't need to do anything. But who's buying that oil? China's buying it. And so where are they getting their weapons? Well, they're getting their weapons from Russia. Where are they getting their drones? They're getting their drones from Iran. So you've got a country that has aligned with, the BRICS, let's say, a system that works outside the dollar, a network where you can do this. But what is the problem? The problem is that normally, if you thought of America as a sovereign nation, you would be thinking, no, that can't be on our doorstep. But America's not sovereign. America is run by the financial industrial complex and corporate interest. And so what do they say? Well, they say, well, America wants more GDP, and Chevron and Exxon want more revenue. So we want China to continue buying the oil. But we want better terms. And so if you want better terms, and by the way, there's a new discovery right on the border of Venezuela called Guyana, which is the largest discovery, then you pretend that you're coming after the drug cartels. The drug cartels, by the way, how does the deep state fund itself? The CIA, MI6, Mossad, they are funded by black op off-balance sheet operations, which is humans trafficking, sex trafficking, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking. If you want to stop drugs in America, then you need to have a CIA conversation, because that's how they fund their black ops. They have partnerships with the drug cartels. And so if you want better terms on those, then what you need to do is you create a narrative. And so Trump's job is to create an acceptable narrative for the American people in order to justify a negotiation that gets better terms. Now, at the same time,
we can kill you.
Yep, absolutely. And don't be shocked by that. America's been behind, the American and British Empire have been behind hundreds of millions of deaths, like around the world. Like these are not organic events. These are engineered campaigns.
And we also, I mean, you mentioned they got the Chinese addicted to opioids. And we also know in Afghanistan that they very quickly protected the poppy fields, allowed the drug trade to continue.
Yeah, so let's look at Afghanistan. So Afghanistan, people frame it as America failed. The joke is they spent 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban and spend $2 trillion. Now, that is unsuccessful if you're a sovereign nation called United States of America. But if you are a corporate interest, you made $2 trillion of revenue out of that war? Rebuild contracts. You also took a group called the Taliban, which were fighting against poppy seeds and drugs. And you replaced it with a new version of the Taliban that allowed the drugs to flow. And you created a narrative that you were doing something different. So the Taliban that we see today is not the Taliban that were fighting the drug trafficking. We've got America's Taliban now. And you can see how the media narratives, if you look via the NGOs, USAID, you see all the funding into BBC, funding into all the different National Endowment of Democracy, all these different organizations. We call it foreign aid. That is essentially the blackmail operations in order to allow these things to do. So what was Afghanistan? You managed to get the drugs flowing again. You got $2 trillion of revenue, and you put a proxy version of the Taliban from a resistance version of the Taliban. Very successful operation, but who lost? The Afghan people lost, and the American people lost. Why? Because that was $2 trillion that was printed to roll over the debt-based Ponzi scheme.
So that was inflation.
Yes, that was inflation. Now, if you own the stocks, you were on the right side of that inflation.
The rich get richer, the poor get poorer.
Exactly. Everybody else is paying a higher price, which means you need to borrow more, pay more credit card at 30%, and you are the product for the bank.
So how do you look at 9/11?
9/11, I got a 4-hour documentary that goes through the declassified document by the FBI and tries to reverse engineer the bits that were redacted based upon likely names from other cases.
The copy and paste didn't work in those ones. Did you see that in the Epstein files?
Absolutely.
Fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
There you go. These are okay. We'll allow them to discover this. That could be a red herring. That's the thing. We are in psychological operations to confuse us as much as possible and point at the wrong things. 9/11 was, okay, so you had a military-industrial complex, financial-industrial complex, and technical-industrial complex operation. So firstly, prior to 9/11, you already had the clean break memo, which was the 7 countries and 7 wars that America wanted to fight in 5 years. You had that already as a policy. You also had Patriot Act already written. So Patriot Act was a mechanism for creating the word terrorism in order to remove the constitutional due process and be able to just at will justify these wars. Remove due process in America and usher in the technical industrial complex progression. 9/11 was a very successful operation. If you go into the declassified documents, the CIA were all over it. The Mossad was all over it. There was Urban Movers, funded by Steve Witkoff, by the way, who is in the Trump administration now, which was a Mossad moving company that had bomb traces as one of the things that they had access to 9/11 via the art students Mossad operation. These are not the conspiracy theories. These are the declassified documents, FBI documents in there. You had them detained for 9 months, and then you had massive pressure campaign to send them back to Israel. And the laundering of the money, all the monetary flows, happened via Saudi intelligence. So you had CIA, Saudi intelligence, and Mossad that were all involved in 9/11, and it solved multiple purposes. It could finance all of those wars. There was all the issues with the Twin Towers and the insurance payouts. Mm-hmm. You can go through all of that.
Took out a new premium, weeks before?
Yeah, so I think there was a $4 billion payout to Larry Silverstein, who was given the opportunity, an Israeli-American dual national, in order to purchase the towers and take out the first ever terrorist insurance contract. You also had the two of the, what they do is they give you all the crazy conspiracy theories. There was no plane and it was a remote control, or it was all like, it couldn't, they give you the crazy ones to drown out the genuine ones. And so you get pushed into that group. But I follow like Ryan Dawson, who's done some great documentaries, like going through all this stuff. And I kind of just put it in with the follow the money type of philosophy of how these operations work. But if you look at really the entirety of the $38 trillion debt today, it follows the Bank of England story.
What time does the debt collapse? At what point does the debt collapse? It becomes unmanageable. Because it feels like there's a combination of things, say, here in the UK, in Europe and the US, which means things are starting to fray.
Yeah, so the first thing to understand is that world reserve currency is what America has.
Yes.
And that's the important part. Once you have the world reserve currency, you have the ability to continually print it, export debt, and you can run these twin deficits, trade deficit and fiscal deficit, i.e. the government can spend more and you can export more than, you can import more than you export. That's a requirement to have world reserve currency. So you got to roll that up. There's a debt-based Ponzi scheme. You got to keep going. As long as you can grow at a rate that is higher than the average cost of your debt, then you can continue the debt-based Ponzi scheme. So there will be an average price on that 38 trillion.
Hey, is this MMT?
It's worse than it is kind of MMT, but the banks get all the interest and the money. So MMT is better because MMT, you don't actually pay the interest and you don't give it to the bank. You don't privatize it. The treasury receives the money and spends it and they receive the benefit. And so under this model, so if you look at China, the PBOC model is they have a state central bank with a bunch of commercial banks, which are all state controlled. In general, there's a few private, but in general, you've got state controlled local banking and PBOC. All the currency that's printed goes back to the government and the government reinvests it in its own infrastructure. Under the current model in America, the dollars are printed, but the money goes to the bank. And then the bank is now using that money to do what? Firstly, they become global. And so they form alliances. They don't have an America First agenda. An American bank is not America First. It's a global institution that does deals with China, the Gulf countries, Russia, and the world. And so there's no America First. And then what do they do with their profits? They buy the politicians. And so the lobby, the financial lobby, controls Congress, Senate, and then via the military industrial complex, you have the deep state, and then you can do the illegal stuff to bribe judicial. And so you have the illusion of democracy. And so what actually ends up happening then, when the banks take out too much risk, they socialize the losses and they privatize the gains, as we've seen. What does that do? That leads to a higher concentration of power. So knowing that the central bank and the government will always bail out, you just keep going until no one will buy your debt. Eventually, there won't be the right market. And so what does the Trump administration have to do? Well, BlackRock tells him what to do. Tariffs, reset the world order, make everyone trade with China, make everyone hate America, deconstruct the deep state, which means you take away everything that propped up the dollar, break the euro dollar by going nuts on Europe, break the Japan carry trade, allow the Bank of Japan to put their rates up, break the petrodollar, so that now 30% of oil is priced in yuan. And what do? We start competing with the Gulf countries. So now America and the Gulf compete. China's providing all the money for the sovereign wealth of the Gulf countries. So who do you think Saudi Arabia needs to answer to? So what are they doing right now? They say, right, we'll buy up all of America's AI companies. We'll buy up all of Europe. We'll buy up all the real estate. We'll co-invest with BlackRock. We'll get a board seat on BlackRock. And so the Gulf sovereign wealth funds have partnered with the financial industrial complex because they're not the financial industrial complex is not America first. It's a global institution by definition. And so if BlackRock now wants to reset the chessboard, it can say, Europe, you're going to be a war zone. We can do some demographic operations. We can do all sorts of things to acquire the assets on the cheap. America, you're going to be the data center, the AI hub. China, you're sovereign. We're negotiating with you. At some point, BlackRock will say we'll reallocate some of our capital over to Chinese tech companies rather than American. But first, we'll asset strip everything out of America that we can. So let's push the K-shaped economy to the extreme. So what do? You say, Trump, print as much as you can. Push all of that money into the US stock market. We'll tell you where to allocate it. Get more revenue for the military industrial complex. Make sure that you're pushing as much money into AI. Create a narrative that there's systemic risk. China's about to take over the world with AI. If we don't spend everything, recycle all of these contracts around ChatGPT over to NVIDIA. Make sure that NVIDIA has no bearing on reality, is geopolitically strategic. And then what we'll do is you go and pretend that you're negotiating tariffs with countries, and we'll just negotiate access to chips, access to revenue, and we'll start building all the data centers in the Middle East. And we'll start, every time you do a negotiation, you pretend it's Make America Great Again, while we'll just sell off all the stocks with Chinese money through Gulf sovereign wealth funds that partnered with this whole financial industrial complex. And so that we are in the asset stripping phase.
So, and the money's moving east.
The money's moving east.
So is that why Ray Dalio has moved all his money into Singapore? Does he? Well, he knows what's going on.
He prepared for this decades ago. He's on the right side of these investments. These people, they're part of the financial industry. If you want to own the West, you own BlackRock, and that's a public company.
I don't really want to own BlackRock now.
Exactly. Because they are fundamentally profit maximizing in a 3-month game that requires them to meet the goal of this financial industrial complex, and they're a part of it. And even they managed, this is what the asset managers was really interesting. So they managed to get the banks that create the dollars in the first place. They managed to get the investment banks that securitize and financialize everything. They managed to get the private equity companies that can buy all the assets on the cheap, borrowing from the government. They don't have the money. Silicon Valley doesn't have the money. They just have access to the 0% money. They have access to the cheap capital. And then you have a bunch of people that can be these celebrity icon billionaires, when really all of these major tech companies were just funded with government money. And we privatized it all. And we ended up with the board seat, and we're just asset stripping. And so now I think we asked, what is BlackRock wanting to do now? And I say BlackRock, it's decentralized power structure based upon who owns these asset managers. And that's an interesting conversation in itself.
So the asset managers run the world.
The asset managers run the world. They partner with the sovereign wealth funds. And the sovereign wealth funds are the ones that kept their central bank independent and managed to not privatize their resources so they don't have to tax their people. So there's no tax in the Middle East because, as an alternative to tax, they took all their oil, put it in a sovereign wealth fund, and used it for their people and reinvested in their people. And we're told that that's socialism, communism, capitalism. And so what ends up happening is you create a narrative in America. And by the way, I did a master's in economics. It was a long time ago. The bullshit behind these models, and again, you ask yourself, what is the university college system? Who created that? Who funds these syllabuses? Who determines what research moves forward? Where it just so happens that just like you can control a government, you can control an education.
Well, we keep inventing new economic models, or keep discussing new economic models that seem to justify government. And we don't seem to see any return to free markets and
But why? Because the government is the piggy bank.
Of course, I know that. I know why. I know, like every kid I meet now who's going to study economics, even my daughter wants to do economics A-level. I'm like, right, you're going to be reading Hayek and you're going to go and say to your professor, Keynes is bullshit.
Yeah.
But Keynes was close to the government.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was Bretton Woods too, got the world to, he wanted to do what they want to do today, which is one world currency. And he wanted to create the Bancor. In the end, he created the justification for taking the world off the gold standard, making everyone trade their currencies against the dollar. And then the dollar said, I promise we'll keep the gold and you can trade your Federal Reserve notes for gold. And then in 1971, after the Vietnamese War, when the French turned up with a ship and said, give me my gold, and just said, no, we ain't got it. You ain't having it, and defaulted. So America defaulted then.
Oh, I thought they gave the French the gold back.
Nah, they didn't give it. I don't know what happened. Maybe something happened after, but that was the default, and that's when they came off the gold standard. So you can no longer convert the
I
notes.
don't want to live in this world anymore.
Yeah.
I want to live in a world where I believe you can have a chance as a good person to go out there and democratically win elections and represent your people. It just sounds like we're fucked whatever.
Well, they sold us a lie. They were the whole democracy was a lie.
Well, I know that. I know that. And I know there's special interests. I'm not that naive. But just to be this coordinated.
Putting it all together just means, Well, what do you do?
What do you do? You can't do anything.
Your choice is basically go sit on a beach somewhere and forget about it.
Just go into
the first thing, like when you come to firstly, you can continue to engage in delusion. You can continue to believe that changing the politician will change something. Or you can, focus on the community level. So I do believe community politics makes a difference.
Well, we have talked about that. I mean, I have no confidence in reform and Nigel Farage being able to change anything. It feels like it's just a moment of capture. But also, you end up sounding like that crazy uncle at the Christmas dinner. Oh, you can't trust them. It's all the deep state, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, that's a psyop in itself. And, I've been fighting that ever since I left investment banking in 2006. So that's been 19 years. I've been told I'm crazy. And every time they tell me I'm crazy, I try to find some, whether I am crazy or not. And every time I go further and further down the rabbit hole, it turns out that I've been quite accurately able to predict things based upon following the money and ignoring politicians and ignoring media. And so while everyone is focused on media and politicians, once you realize that, okay, what actually does move the world? Well, money moves the world. So your money is your vote. And that's the conclusion that I come to. So the best you can do is boycott, and go local, and support yourself, your family, and your community.
And not put your head above the parapet so much that they want to disappear you.
Well, there's kind of two things that are happening right now. I'm long gone on that one.
Yeah.
But there's two things that are happening right now. So the next world order is, I believe, a multipolar world order. And at the same time, you talked about coordinators. So most people, when they hear this, they think, is this some kind of organized cabal? It's actually not. It's a ruthless game of betrayal at the top, power dynamics and access to capital. And you can throw people off the network and then operations go wrong. It's a ruthless game. But what I've found most useful is to figure out who rules the world. I think, I looked at who owns all these shares to try and answer that question. Because inevitably, when you go down this path, there's kind of a couple of narratives that if you're online, you know there's a couple of narratives right now.
Rothschilds.
Yeah, you either the Jews rule the world,
yeah,
or Qatar rules the world, and there's an invasion, right? And Muslims are taking over. Those are the two narratives. If you go on X right now, you can find a 24/7 space that will tell you how every single thing and every problem in the world is because of the Jews. And then you can go on the same space and they'll tell you the exact same thing, but they'll tell you how it's the Muslims, it's the terrorists, it's Qatar. And depending on how much time you spend your algorithm will adjust to feed the narrative that backs up the hate and belief that you need in order to believe those two things.
Well, I've started to notice the algorithmic tyranny recently in both YouTube and X. X weirdly, I've started calling it X. I always said I wouldn't. I was calling it Twitter forever. But I've noticed that X, it very quickly reconfigures yourself to the latest thing you're looking at. And so, for example, this week there was an interview between Andrew Gold and Steve Laws. Steve Laws is an FNAT, like just total FNAT. Ethnic nationalist. And within 3 days, all I've got is ethno-nationalist content or debates or arguments. And I just feel like that's feeding me right at the moment.
Absolutely.
And then at the same time, we will make a certain kind of show. And if it's slightly controversial, that is then targeted at that group. And if you don't agree with them, you get annihilated in the comments. So there's like these kind of like algorithmic biases being created that is forcing people also into echo chambers because you feel like, I'm the weirdo.
Yeah.
I'm not a racist. That makes me a weirdo at the moment. So it's like, it's a bit weird the way it's happening.
Are both a distraction anyway? Is it neither? It's not the Muslims or the Jews.
Yeah. I think we're being compartmentalized into boxes right now. And so, if you're like a white nationalist American, then you'll end up in the Nick Fuentes box.
Yep.
If you're like a Britain boomer, kind of socialist, you'll end up in the Piers Morgan type of box. If you are a Christian conservative woman that is discovering that they think Israel rules the world, you'll end up in Candace Owen. And then if you're a man, you'll end up with Tucker Carlson. And they're compartmentalizing us into the box we need to be in order to radicalize us into our ideology as much as possible. And then they can use those algorithms in order to, I think the goal is, so let's look at the bigger goal. So I think BlackRock wants to split the world up into a multipolar world order. That's the next empire. It's saying the Gulf countries, you have your sovereign wealth. We'll transition from the forever war model over to peace in the Middle East, which requires regional stability and investment in data centers and access to energy, including nuclear.
It'd probably help then if you had a revolution in Iran and
so
move the Ayatollah.
I think my personal belief, and most people disagree with me on this, most people think Israel rules the world and Israel's going to get America into a war with Iran. We're going to do a regime change, and then it's going to be World War III, and Israel's going to rule the world. That's like a common narrative in the circles I hang around with. I think it's the complete opposite. I think Iran has already been regime changed.
Okay.
And the IRGC are completely on board with everything that's happening right now. So you saw that Hezbollah was taken out. You saw the Houthis have calmed down. You see the militias. By the way, also the stories around militias is completely different as well.
Okay.
So like, for example, I'm jumping around a little bit here. But if you look at Hamas, Hamas is located in Qatar, Doha, because America asked them to be there. And the only way to get money into the Palestinian banking system is via the Israeli banking system. Or if you want to put cash in the border, then you have to do it via the Egyptian border. The Egyptian border is subordinate to IMF. And the biggest aid producers are Israel. American aid goes to Israel, Egypt, and Jordan that surround, that region. And so if you want to level the playing field and you want to rebuild a brochure called a technocratic Orwellian nightmare, then you allow something like October the 7th to happen and you use media to make it look like it's something different from what it actually was. And that is an operation that's happened time and time again. And so the whole militia side, you can look at Iran-Contra affair to find when Iran was working with American intelligence, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking. You can look at Turkey operations. You can look at Qatar operations. You can look at all the different Saudi Gulf countries, and you can see every single one of them took a different approach in a manufacturing civil unrest, strategic tension, and never allow them to, be around their resources. And Israel is obviously the destabilizing force for the US military-industrial complex. Netanyahu doesn't work for Israel. Netanyahu works for the military-industrial complex. And there is a change that's happening as a result of this world order, because the financial industrial complex is co-investing with the Gulf countries. And so they've persuaded regional stability, because we've now got China money and you get your region. So America, I believe, is being shrunk into the Western Hemisphere. And Trump is there to use tariff policy and deconstruct everything that's propped up the dollar in order to shrink America into a regional power. And in exchange, the military gets to say, right, you're no longer got the profits of the forever war in the Middle East. You can go back to Europe and South America. We'll make up for lost revenue there. And we'll subordinate, we'll do, civil unrest campaigns. And yeah, we'll give you your digital ID, your Palantir surveillance state, your social credit score. America, we'll privatize all the stable coins, and you guys can have a CBDC so that all the power goes up to the American stock market, and you'll be fully subordinate. And that's the operation right now, is the asset stripping phase.
Go on.
There's a positive side to that.
Okay.
Because peace in the Middle East is something that we've never witnessed in our lifetime, and exactly. I believe we will witness, which has consequences. It means that Asia gets to rise with China, and Africa might actually get to use its resources. So we need to settle Sudan, Yemen, Libya, all the other previous wars. And they're currently being negotiated with the financial industrial complex, which has said, right, the military, we're going to exit, but what are you going to give the banks? And the banks are saying, right, what we need to do is we'll send ISIS into Syria. We'll pretend that we're protecting the Christians, create some crazy narrative. We'll put the head of ISIS as the president of Syria. He can come to the White House. We'll legitimize him, which is the Gulf country and Turkey's selection. And then we'll lift sanctions, but only on these conditions. And so right after Giuliani met with Trump in the White House, Trump went and met with all the banks. They started constructing their 40-year land deals in Syria. They started front-running everything. They started divvying up the land between all the banks and financial institutions. And the Gulf countries and the financial industrial complex get to basically have regional stability. And the military will exit, and the finance is negotiating what the terms are. And so why do they need to do that? Because there's only two countries which have birth rates right now, Africa and the Middle East. The rest of them, they ain't having children. They need robotics and AI.
What is the role of Bitcoin in all of this? And is
Bitcoin,
it captured?
Okay, so Bitcoin to me it's a boycott.
Yeah.
If you want to boycott the Federal Reserve, then you have to own money outside the system. Gold or Bitcoin are two ways of doing that. If you want to boycott BlackRock, you have to own it in self-custody. Most people can't self-custody gold, so they end up self-custodying Bitcoin, or they can do self-custody gold in a small scale. If you want to boycott the global, the banks, then you don't mine fiat currency by custodying your Bitcoin and borrowing against it and being a part of Howard Lutnick's treasury companies and Bitcoin-backed loans and all the different shit that Michael Saylor and everyone's creating. They're trying to centralize as much Bitcoin as possible within America. They've got they've got a couple of million Bitcoin now in their constructs. So whatever happens to Bitcoin, they'll be fine. BlackRock managed to centralize as much as possible. Strategy is subordinate to the financial industrial complex.
Hold on, is Saylor the equivalent of Dorsey?
Yes.
That's why he gets the 0% loans.
Yeah. What is Strategy's mission? Yeah, exactly. Strategy's mission is, I will get as much Bitcoin in this public company as I can borrow or I can sell equity. Who's he selling it to? The financial industrial complex. And they'll construct debt instruments on what used to be equity instruments so that you have obligations that supersede. And the only way to pay your dividends or pay your debt is to either sell Bitcoin or borrow more or sell more equity. That is full submission to the financial industrial complex. And then when we're ready, rather than destroy you or send you into Chapter 11 like Celsius and others, we'd much rather have you as a tool. Centralize as much Bitcoin as you can. Get as much of it as you can. We've got a lovely tool to manipulate the short-term price of Bitcoin. We can get it where you have to sell it, or we can issue corporate debt. And if you take on corporate debt, it comes with massive terms and conditions. And eventually, if you're a good person, Sailor, we'll manufacture the media narrative that gets you into the S&P 500. First, we want more debt. We want more equity in there. And then once you get into the S&P 500, you'll get our passive flows. And we can use media in order to manipulate people. And then we'll create another one, 21 Capital. Tether, Jack Dorsey. Jack Mallers. Partner him up with Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick is as deep state as you can get. Like he's involved in all operations. And then you can, roll up Strike, get people to borrow against their Bitcoin, custody as much as possible. We'll create multiple operations. We'll get the media side of Bitcoin. David Bailey, you come over here. What about the developer side? Adam Back, you come over here. Put your Bitcoin in our treasury companies. Partner with these stable coins. 2015, Jeffrey Epstein tried to penetrate the developer community. We'll release some files on that. And we'll get as much of the Bitcoin mining away from China and over to America. And then what we'll do, we'll make them public companies, and then we'll create a ETF, and we'll manage the passive inflows. So that was their operation, to centralize as much as possible. As long as we have nodes, miners, and self-custody, then we can opt out. But the short-term price is captured now.
Does it require people like us to self-custody, run nodes, for it to have value for them to be able to control it? Like if it was fully centralized, would it lose all its value?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're just allowed.
We are in a mission. The fight is not over. I'm still here for a reason.
We allowed a Millennium Falcon.
Yes. And we cheered it on. And we got really excited. And Trump, congratulations. You fooled them all. And what did he do? He rewrote the law to say we can confiscate Bitcoin and send Samurai Wallet into prison. So we'll come after self-custody. We'll launch as many shitcoins as possible. We'll create the Stablecoin Genius Act, where JP Morgan gets to create the Federal Reserve, collateralize it by stablecoins. We'll give them an edge by having yield. And we'll update the executive order where you can confiscate as much Bitcoin as possible. We're still Bitfinex's shareholders, Bitcoin. I'm one of them. I'd like the Bitcoin back, thanks. And instead, Tether's sitting around the White House, rebuilding the ballroom, and the crypto lobby is integrated into the financial industrial complex. And all the people that were on this mission are suddenly integrated into BlackRock and the complex.
We're not in.
Exactly. And that's the important
point. Are you
doing
this, Connor? Are you like, oh, fuck.
Well, like...
But once you know. That's the good thing.
Simon might be a madman.
That's true.
Potentially. But also...
He might be 100% right.
It all sort of adds up.
Yeah, so we have a battle ahead, which is that...
do we? Like, do you lose no matter what? Is it too, like...
Where's your fight, boy? Where's your fight?
I think you lose.
Okay.
I'm realistic.
The realistic battle is there will be a two-tiered Bitcoin. Most people will custody Bitcoin. At the moment, about 70% don't. 70% of the Bitcoin. All of those, remember those massive Bitcoins we sold, all the old whales are selling? I got no evidence for this, but I'm pretty sure that these are the Peter Thiels and the various other operators that were engaging in the market manipulations.
Oh, you think all those big... Because it's all of a sudden a lot at the same time.
Yeah, complete speculation. Got no evidence for it. But I believe that some of those old Bitcoin wallet addresses are controlled by early operators. I do believe that Bitcoin came from intelligence, but it open sourced, which meant it was irrelevant.
Right.
Yeah. I do think that Len Sassaman and Hal Finney and their funding and working with David Chom, I do think it was an offshoot. And this is why I think this is interesting. We've got off UK and gone on to Bitcoin quite a lot.
Yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
It's a Easter egg for the old listeners.
Okay, cool.
There are a few, by the way.
Yeah.
Walker will be listening. He listens regularly.
Okay. Where was I going? Where were we going? Bitcoin.
Len, Hal.
Yeah.
Offshoot.
I think it created an open source, like offshoot. Here's what gives me hope. And here's what, if your goal is to think that wealth redistribution gets solved and Bitcoin's going to suddenly make everyone and all the mini people and everyone, that's not going to happen, I don't think.
Okay.
It won't solve wealth redistribution. It will save as many people that are willing to listen and take action, I personally believe. And I believe as many people need to be in self-custody, running nodes. There's going to be a certain percentage of the network that needs to remain on that mission. And we've got a lot of work to do with that. But there is a reason why, I live on an island because the British colonizers needed escape valves for elites when they want to leave. And so you allowed Cayman Islands and you allowed Isle of Man and you allowed Jersey and Guernsey and all of these different places to exist. You allowed Swiss bank accounts to exist because the rich and wealthy want them. And so the rich and wealthy want Bitcoin in self-custody, but they want you to put your Bitcoin in their custody because they want to lever it up and they want to create derivatives and they want you to have margin calls. And they want to take as much of your Bitcoin as possible in their custody. And so they will do that, and they will succeed to the vast majority of people.
Motherfuckers.
Yes. But just don't mind the fiat currency against your Bitcoin.
How do we be...
So sorry. You don't lose and you win by playing the game. That's your only choice. You kind of have to play the game.
I have not found a way of beating the financial industrial complex, and they got as much Bitcoin so that whatever happens with Bitcoin, they're going to be fine.
So you have to become part of the evil.
No, you have to boycott the evil by holding it in self-custody. If you hold it with the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF and you borrow against it, then you're part of the evil. And that's the decision
But you become part of the evil by doing that because you know the majority of people won't be able to.
You have to have something. You have to live.
Yes, but if you do that knowing 70% of people won't do that.
Well, then we have to educate them. You know what we should do? We should start a Bitcoin podcast.
Exactly.
We should start a Bitcoin. We could call it What Bitcoin Didn't.
And I filmed another episode on there.
Yeah. This is What Bitcoin Didn't.
I don't know.
But here's the thing. I don't believe wealth redistribution. So firstly, you have to decide where you're going to live. I believe that this is the decline of the West. I don't think anything stops that train. I think it gets worse. I think Europe gets worse. I think UK gets worse. I think America gets worse. If you own assets, you'll have the best time of your life. The rich are going to be fine.
It's time to get the fuck out.
Yes. Now, you can escape to islands, or you can go join a country that for the very first time in history is going to be decolonized from the British American Empire. And for them, it's going to be great. This is going to be the first time in millennia that Africa might be able to use their own resources.
Yeah, I might not go to Africa just yet, although I quite like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quite like it.
Asia, I think, is going to be great for all of them. There's some of them...
I'm a big fan of Thailand. I was looking at properties in Thailand recently. They look quite nice.
Yeah, the ones, they're very vassalized into BlackRock.
Right.
Like anyone... So the tariff policy had 3 impacts. Firstly, it wiped out all of the small business in America because they paid the tariff. They couldn't afford it. Right. And so they got the mergers and acquisitions up to the large companies. It was like COVID for that. So you wipe out the small business, you hoover them up into the large multinationals. That was impact one. And then obviously that leads to somewhat, we haven't seen too bad inflation, but systemically inflation's about 3% in the US. It seems like it's going to stay there. You just created another tax. Here's the scam. There's a movement around right now. This is a live campaign. Right, hold on. I'm jumping too much. I'll finish the 3 thoughts and then I'll get back to tax. So that was the first one. The second one is the export-dependent countries got pushed up into the same companies as well. So if you're in Vietnam and you're subordinate and you got wiped out and consolidated up as well. That's why we had Blackrock and China negotiating all the ports, all the different trade routes, all the Gulf countries. That's why we're seeing, it appears like it's World War III. I don't think it is World War III. This is a massive, massive change in the world.
Right. And is it this part of the reason why Russia wanted Crimea and parts of Ukraine, because they wanted access to those ports?
So there's with Ukraine and Russia, there's like a win-win game with Russia and the financial industrial complex.
Okay.
The longer this goes on for, the better it gets for them. They get more land and BlackRock gets more resources, and they make more money and they subordinate Ukraine and they kill more Ukrainians for their profits.
Ugh. Oh, fuck, man.
Yeah.
Okay, where do we go live then? Oh, sorry, no, let me finish your point.
And then, so, this is the rise of Asia. I think Asia's going to have massive growth. I think Africa's going to have massive growth. I think Middle East is going to have the highest growth. And I think the global South in general, the rule of thumb, the closer you are to America, the worse it will be.
Okay.
So if you're Central South America, if you're Europe, you are fully subordinate and you are a playground for military profits.
How long do you think we got?
I don't know how to answer that question because I'm going to go back to tax, but I think that brings up an interesting one. Currently, the financial industrial complex are in charge, but there is a new thing called, I guess, this one world government, Orwellian 1984, one central bank digital currency type of conspiracy theory. The data centers and the energy are in the Middle East. America's got the software and the hardware. And China's got the manufacturing base. Africa's got the labor. I believe that BlackRock would like to consolidate that all into a massive control grid where maybe, just maybe, money doesn't really matter because everyone's on some kind of UBI. This is where we're going into the 10-year, 20-year prediction. I don't know what the world looks like in 10 years.
Con, can you get a chart up of the US debt? I want to see it as an actual chart. Because it's pretty hockey stick, right?
Yep.
And is that...
that's the British Empire right there.
Hold on. That's the UK.
Oh, you got UK there.
No, that's US. 38 billion. Trillion. Gazillion billion.
Yeah.
156%. Okay. World War II. Hold on, that doesn't seem right. Just go to Google Images and just search for US debt. Yeah, these are one of the ones. Right. Yeah. So, actually, Con, go over to the left. See that newest? Yeah, that one. See, right. So, at some point, it just can't work anymore, so and then you're done.
Yeah, so what you're seeing there is World War II, America fairly debt-free. Cold War, debt. Then you have Korean War.
Yep.
Then you have Vietnamese War.
Yep.
Then you have
Iraq.
The fall of the Soviet Union. Then you have all the Middle Eastern wars and the fake war on terror. You have bank bailout. You have long-term capital management, bailout of the hedge funds. Mm-hmm. You have global financial crisis, bailout of the banks. You then have COVID, which is massive concentration into the technical industrial complex and the financial industrial complex. And if you look at what is all of that debt, it is interest, war, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. If you're running those demographics right now, how do you solve those demographics? The UK looks a little bit similar. You need to try and make up for it through immigration.
Yeah.
Or you do civil unrest and turn it into some kind of universal basic income.
But they're milking the end of it, right? There comes a point where you can't just keep rolling it over. To the point where it's useful.
As long as American GDP growth, which just printed 4.7% through fake all of these operations of Trump spending, and more of it is government, as long as that is greater than the average cost of the debt, which is about 3.3%. So what's Trump trying to do? He's doing fiscal dominance, which means print as much money as you can and we'll spend it into the stock market. If the left get their way, then that's social programs, which means the banks and the insurance companies get to manage more money and they put it where they want it. Mm-hmm. If the right get their way, then we put it into the technical industrial complex, call it capitalism, winning the AI war. And we do it into military expenditure. So he just announced AI battleships.
Oh, the Trump fleet.
Yes, the Trump fleet. So you get all of that. And then a bunch of it goes into Palantir, which is the surveillance state. So either way, you keep rolling over. And then what he's trying to do right now is monetize, which essentially means I'll run the economy hot, push everything into the stock market, screw everyone else. If you own shares, you'll be fine. And we're going to put as much into the stock market. And I'm going to roll over the debt on the short term. So he's saying Fed, we'll put interest rates down. And what's happening to the long-term interest rates? By the way, this is what's happening in UK. The long-term interest rates are getting more and more expensive. The short-term interest rates are going down. So he's rolling over the debt, with T-bills, while the market is saying, hold on, this is not looking good. If I'm going to lend to you for 10 years, I got to pay more. That's crashing the price of bonds while increasing the yield. And he's just running the economy hot. That is the emerging market end of cycle type of actions.
How long we got?
And then they just go to the east and restart.
Yeah, so then, but what will they do? Well, what they need to do is do what they did to UK. You shrink the currency into a regional currency and you manage just a series of asset stripping, stock market growth. So if you look at the UK, the economy is shit, but the stock market's at all-time highs.
I know. And then fucking Labour say, look, we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
And so they all say the stock market's at all-time highs because it's mass corruption.
Hold on. So, and to pay for this, you have to eviscerate the middle class.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You'll get wage compression between the working class and the middle class will be destroyed.
Yes, and you nothing stops that train, as Lynn Alden says.
But you can keep your welfare program going. You can keep everyone just ticking over.
Yeah, and you keep it going until the last bond won't be bought. That's it.
So hope is really cope.
Yes.
Yeah. Fuck, man.
Well, actually, what is hope? You have to firstly be an asset owner. That's the only way.
Yeah.
The stock market.
It comes back to my game, which it comes back to my point though.
What's the fucking point?
You have to play the game.
Yes,
you have to be an asset owner.
But I personally, for me, I wouldn't invest in Palantir stock and I wouldn't buy S&P index because I don't want to support this shit.
Yeah.
But by Bitcoin, investing in any asset, you are supporting this shit because you are realizing this is how it works, and I have to do this.
No, you have to live, and so you've got.
So does everyone.
Yeah,
what
sure.
You're saying is all those people will get left behind, and that's fine.
But we already knew that anyway. We already know.
Fucking shit.
Yeah, it is shit. But that's been as long as time, right? But like your choice is jump off a cliff. You're not allowed to do that because I need you around. Secondly, it's go okay. What part of the system am I willing to be? So, like for example, if we wanted to stay in the UK, we could pay off the mortgage. We could put a little vegetable garden in the garden. We could buy our meat from the local butcher. We could be part of our community, and we just exit the financial system as much as possible. That means Bitcoin or gold or whatever. You have to drive on the road, and you have to use the internet. You have to do part of it, or you go and live in a country and just, I don't know, buy a ranch and live off grid.
Boycotts work. I've been involved in the anti-war movements before I was involved in Bitcoin. And we when the Malaysians decided that they weren't going to go to Starbucks, and got a Starbucks here, because they were supporting Israeli settlements, and their profits went down. They had to overthrow their CEO. This is the important part. The real money, the real vote is your money, and so you vote with your money.
Yeah,
you have to spend local. Now, look, it's not perfect. I need AI. I need an iPhone.
You could use Venice. You could use Air Voice Venice.
But that's the key thing. You have to become. You're never going to get this perfect. The perfection is an evil. Is an enemy here.
Yeah.
You need to every week, just like the right advice with Bitcoin. I think you always said this as well. It was own more Bitcoin this month than last month. That was always the right advice. Yeah. Be better. Boycott more this month than last month. And so be more conscious. Are you support? Am I investing in a global machine, or am I investing in my local football club, my local community? Am I, doing private? This is why I think it was really interesting what you were doing, Peter, because you were going local, and you were just recognizing that investing local, supporting local, buying local.
But I gave up most of it.
Yeah,
because everything I did suddenly became political.
Yeah.
And I got attacked in every direction.
And the machine was too big.
Yeah, the machine was too big. And I was like, okay, well, I need to stop worrying about local stuff, because actually I can't change things. We were going to open this pizza place and we cancelled it because we can't make any fucking money. There's too much tax, too much bureaucracy.
Yeah.
So we was like, well, we need to go to the national level. So it's like, at the national level, I can have influence. I've got touch points with various MPs and various political leaders. I can influence that. And then, maybe I'll become an MP. But I was like, well, fuck become an MP. I don't want to become part of the state. Exactly. And now we're at this point where in a day, I built a website called iknolongerconsent.com. Mm-hmm. And I did the Twitter profile. And I just saying to everything, I don't want to be part of this. But maybe that is a decentralized movement. Say, I'm not going to be part of this.
Correct.
This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy local. It's a bit more effort, but we're going to go and shake the hand of the local farmer and buy a steak from him. We're going to go and buy our fruit and veg from the local farm. We're just going to stop using all of these motherfuckers. We literally will only support local privately owned businesses and farmers, put all our money in Bitcoin, and just that's what we do. That's our boycott. Or we just go and live in the Cayman.
I completely agree with that. And, we become more and more conscious about our supply chains. We think, whose honey are we buying here?
Yeah, is it liquid sugar?
Yeah.
But do you know what the funny thing is? Sorry, I've known you for a long time, but even if you were a mad conspiracy theorist, your solution is still something we should be doing anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the best case scenario, there's just massive corporate interest, which we know exist, and we know there's corporate lobbying, and we know they create this kind of moat around their businesses where us as an independent coffee shop is fucking hard, right? It's really hard. Whereas if you've got 1,000 Starbucks, you can centralize your accounting, you can centralize your HR, and you can offshore your profits. We can't do that, right?
Yeah.
But we can create such a good product that enough people come.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason Starbucks is because they subordinated to the financial industrial complex. They took the compromise and they engaged in laundering money in the directions that prop up the empire. Whereas the local coffee shop is not doing that. So I completely, the more decentralized we go, the better. And that has both a spiritual benefit. I believe personally, in my experience, every time I've done something which I think is pretty questionable with my money, it's blown up in my face. Every time I'm intentionally and directionally allocating my money to things that I think make the world a better place, it's multiplied for me many times over. So I do think that there is a spiritual energy behind money, that how it is achieved. And even though there are these big evil empires, these are look at these industries. They are all being exposed right now, whether it's the rap star, whether it's the Hollywood. These people are depressed, addicted to drugs, engaging in, massive degeneracy. These are not happy people.
some of it looks fun.
Yeah.
Well, we saw the yacht, didn't we? We looked at all the yachts parked up at St. Bart's, all the billionaire yachts. Take this as mission.
It comes back to like what is end goal for them? Do you just get a bigger and bigger yacht? Is that it?
It's maintenance of the system. This is systemic. There is no one on top. It's not an organized cabal. If you look at, I know when people say like Jews on top of this whole thing, I looked at that. I did a whole blog post where I just wanted to debunk it because everyone said it. What everyone does is they point, okay, there's a bunch of executives that are Jewish. Fine. What's an executive? Well, an executive is a manager that works for a board. Okay, well, who does the board work for? Well, the board works for the shareholders. So who are the shareholders? Well, that's actually the global wealth, and that changes. And then I looked at the last study, and 55% of global wealth is those that call themselves Christian aligned, 36% atheist aligned, 8% Muslim aligned, 6% Hindu aligned, and 1% Jewish aligned. So that's global wealth distribution. So of course, there's a very small number of them, 16 million relative. So are they punching above their weight? Absolutely, are they punching above their weight? But who is actually achieving all of this wealth? Well, you say, well, they control the banks, they control the media. Well, no, that's not actually accurate. What happened to the banks? The banks are public companies. The banks own the Federal Reserve. So you say they own the Fed. Like, no, the Fed is owned by the member banks. The member banks is owned by the banks. The banks are public companies, and they're owned by the asset managers. Who's the asset manager? Large sovereign wealth funds and your money that's being pulled into ETFs.
So it's just a very, very large, complex set of incentives.
It is profit maximization with zero ethics in a finite game. And countries that maintain their sovereign wealth, they can play an infinite game. It's a bit like Bitcoin. Bitcoin's an infinite game. But if you then take Bitcoin into an options contract and create a derivative of it where it has to be repaid plus interest on a certain date, you created a finite game with your Bitcoin. Now you have to become a speculator and a trader and get the price right. Whereas if you were just playing the infinite game, you just buy it every month and you don't care about price. This is the whole time preference conversation. This is why you have to have, the minute I figured out how this system worked, I had to leave the UK. I was, I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And that was a 10-year time frame from 2015 to where we are 2026 today, to figure out what I needed to do to kind of incrementally get where I could opt out from this system. And now I have no debt, live in a country where it's illegal to borrow, opt out of the system, contribute to decentralization, local farming, and that's where that's the real one. There's a couple of protests at the moment.
Quick thing. Do you think owning property here in the UK is a fool's errand?
I think that the game has changed, where property is just a mechanism for rolling up into the financial industrial complex and becoming a debt slave. And 50-year mortgages in the US is another iteration. The game that I played, and it just worked for me, is that I was broken in debt. I had a mortgage. I was trying to create a business. I avoided Silicon Valley just because Bitcoin worked in the right way. Avoided going public because I sold the company to Coinbase in the end. But I didn't have to get entangled into any of that. And then I paid off my debt. And now I don't owe anyone anything. And so the more you can avoid debt, which I know is a radical thing because most people just are not, that's not going to happen. But the new game is to essentially, you have to own an asset. And I don't think real estate or property is a game that most people can do. And I think actually right now that's an institutional game.
Whereas Bitcoin, you can buy £50 of it and self-custody it.
Absolutely.
So if someone's listening right now and they're like, fuck, I'm fucked. But they're not wealthy. And they've got kids in school. They're kind of trapped. They can't just leave the country. But they just want to have just the best life they can have. And that's a basic life. They can afford their food. They can have a holiday. They're not miserable. Like, what advice would you give? Because there's other people who can exit easily, and there's some that just can't. I mean, they've got family time. There's so many reasons that tens of millions cannot just say, I'm leaving. So what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, let's look at the different boycotts, right? So you've got civil unrest.
Oh, but this boycott is saying, I fucking hate the system, but there's also survival.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it becomes down to reality in the end. So you've got, firstly, if you don't own any asset, this is going to get worse for you. So you have to make your decision. Either you're going to be leveraging into real estate if you can. Either you're going to be borrowing a bit, owning a bit more Bitcoin every month. Either you're going to do the gold, silver game, or you're going to be playing the game into the stock market. But you will not. Your life will get worse and worse and worse, because wages are not going to suddenly start outperforming the market.
Did you see I wrote an article yesterday?
No.
Dig out that 4chan post. You can find it on my subs. Oh, you've got it in your thing. So me and Connor were planning a show for the end of the year, and we were talking about all the different subjects, and we're sat in the Soho hotel, and Connor digs out this tweet, and he sends it to me. And it was like, I wrote an article about inflation yesterday, but my version of inflation is like the naive, childish version of the story you've told. Like, it is that if you haven't got assets, you're fucked, and the money always goes upwards. It is that. But listen to this. There will be no collapse the way some of these people think of it. It's not going to be like the movie Dawn of the Dead or whatever, where one day suddenly shit hits the fan, prices skyrocket, and everyone begins to riot, and the SS comes marching down the street to kill everyone. There will be no happen. It's far more insidious than that. Read the poem The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot and you'll understand. You'll just notice that every day simple things will get a little bit more expensive. Everyone's homes and apartments will get smaller. Your work hours will get longer, but your pay will decrease. You'll see your family and friends less, and you'll find that in time you care less about them. Every day you'll find yourself lowering your standards for everything: work, food, relationships. Job security will no longer exist as a concept. You'll notice that houses and apartments shrinking. People will start hanging on to clothing longer and longer. Less people will get married, even less will have children. People will engross themselves in technological distractions and fantasy while never truly experiencing the real world. Whatever dream people used to have about what their lives were going to be will become for them a distant memory. The only thing left for them will be the reality of their debt and their poverty, and every minute of every day they will be told, "You're stupid, ugly, and weak, but together we are free, prosperous, and safe." That is the collapse, the reduction of the American man into a feudal serf, incapable of feeling love or hate, incapable of seeing the pitiful nature of his situation for what it is or recognizing his own self-worth. And so Connor sent me that and I read it. And what was it you said? You like...
It's the most beautiful and devastating thing I've read
at the
same time.
And it was like, fuck. So we made a show about it. I was like ranting about inflation and fucking elite wankers. And then New Year's Day, I woke up and I hadn't had a late night drinking. So I just went and sat in my coffee shop and just wrote this article. What was it called?
This is the way the world ends.
And that's part of that poem, right? And I just wrote a thing, just mine. Like I looked up what my dad's salary was when in the 70s, and it was like, I don't know, that first house he bought was like 3.5 times the price. So I went on Rightmove, and it's about the same. The aircraft engineer salary now is about the same as what Connor earns. Sorry, Con. And Connor would love to buy a house, and I looked up where my dad bought his 4-bedroom detached house, and I went on Rightmove, same, like equivalent budget, 3.5 times, nothing. So then I looked up what a 4-bedroom detached house would cost. The cheapest one in the area, not as good as my dad's, £385,000. So more than 10 times that. And I was like, fuck. But the really interesting thing about that, I was reading that, I was like, this is miserable. But what are they on about? Like, this is what's happening now. And then we looked, what's the date of the...
2013.
It was actually posted in 2013.
Wow.
And I was like, this is like, even if you're wrong, this is still happening.
Yeah.
Like, we are destroying millions of people's lives slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Just
yeah,
a little bit of chip about, it's one budget here, or it's a price up there, and it's now can't afford private schools, or I now can't take kids on holiday, or I now can't move like little by little, we're destroying. I say we collectively, I just mean the world is destroying people's lives.
Yeah.
And this is the only time I go, well, the communists have got a point. I disagree with their solution, but they are actually identifying the same problem that we identify.
Mm-hmm.
I just disagree with their solution. But it's so fucking sad, Simon.
It is sad. Firstly, I completely agree with every word that was said there in terms of where this is going. And there's no way of sugarcoating that. because it's reality. You can't you can't put together a plan to win unless you know the rules of the game. So I've tried to outline what I believe the rules of the game are.
But you can't. But actually, sorry to interrupt because it's like what Connor said. It's like, yes, actually, the way to play and win the game is yourself. You can't collectively, you can't defeat this. Like, it doesn't matter how much I want to create a people's, like, it'll be infiltrated, they'll start violence, they'll throw me in prison, they'll embarrass me. Like, there's something that will stop that happening. You as revolutionary you want to be, as passionate as you are, and you think, I want to fucking end this shit.
They've got a plan for the revolution, which is a technocratic nightmare, a digital ID.
So you have one option.
Yeah. Well, they can't stop. What can they do to 40 million people who go, I'm going local?
Exactly. There's nothing they can do with that. Now, one thing that's interesting, so there is a campaign.
Although we can't afford it.
Is your algorithm telling you that all the Americans are going to stop paying their tax at the moment?
I've seen some of that. Yeah, and people have talked about that here as well.
Yeah.
It's much harder here because of PAYE.
Yeah. Okay, let me debunk that one. What is tax? It's not to pay for goods and fund the government.
No.
It serves three functions. The first thing is it creates demand for the currency. And so by paying your tax in pounds, it creates demand for pounds. But when you pay your tax, the government is not funded by your tax. The government is funded by money printing.
Yes, this is what the M&T guys say.
Exactly. And when you pay your tax...
It's a controlled inflation, right?
It controls inflation. It's disinflationary. And so when you print the money, you create inflation. And by paying the tax, you contract the supply. So it's disinflationary. So it's just a mechanism for controlling some of the inflation and creating demand for the currency. Some of it, you create the illusion that you're paying and you're going to make it work. But it's a debt-based Ponzi scheme. So you can't repay the debt. When Elon said we're going to repay the debt, he was engaging in giving people delusion that you can pay the debt.
But is this why there are so many mechanisms for rich people to not really pay tax?
Yes. Well, firstly, the rich don't pay the tax. There's so many mechanisms because they want it. And that's why they'll allow Bitcoin in self-custody as well.
There you go, peasants is for you.
Because they want it.
Taxes for you, peasants.
Yeah. And so not paying your tax is sadly inflationary. Yeah. But there is one that breaks everything.
Go on.
If people actually said, I'm not paying my rent and paying my mortgage, that breaks everything.
Because it breaks the banks.
That breaks the banks. That one works.
But what will their answer be? They'll have
their answer will be the pre-crime surveillance state, Elon Musk's social credit score, Peter Thiel, AI pre-crime agenda, powered by a stable coin by David Sachs and a CBDC by the European Union.
So the real winning is not a revolution that will be crushed and won't happen. And the real I do not consent isn't us mass not consenting to somehow get a government that we believe is strong. The real I not consent is just playing outside the system as much as possible.
Agree. That's all I know how to do.
Oh, man. We're going to have a fun journey home, Con, aren't we? God knows we'll be like, let's move somewhere hot. He's probably right.
And maybe move to a country with a game that's played differently. Like there is not wealth destruction. Remember, look what happened to the British Empire. We've just had shit growth ever since World War One. We shrunk the currency from a global world reserve currency to a regional currency. They'll do the same with the dollar. I don't think they may break something, but it will be slowly. Like we lost 7% on the dollar relative to foreign currencies, almost 100% on gold and silver. And they'll keep doing that. So they'll keep shrinking the dollar into a regional currency.
Boy, don't be pessimistic. The way to think about this is I know the game. I know how it's being played. I look after me, my friends, my family, and do the best I can.
Yeah.
It feels selfish.
But
that's not. No, that's altruism.
No, but remember, the decline of an empire is the rise of other powers that have been oppressed by the
sounds
empire.
of it, they have control of the new empire as well.
Actually, I disagree. There are forces in the world that maintain their sovereign wealth.
They're just moving their assets from the west to the east, and they're going to start again.
They, as long as there are countries that don't have a Western central bank and keep their resources to build a sovereign wealth fund, those countries will be able to use those resources for their people and move closer and closer to less tax and low capital. The thing that you need to... Capitalism, communism, socialism, even Austrian economics is all bullshit. There is a country and you have resources and you decide how to use those resources and you decide what is the optimum setup to make sure you're not externally controlled and sovereign.
What are your 2 scarce resources that you have access to?
Currently?
Yeah. One you'll get, one you won't. I think. I've talked about this a lot.
I think knowledge.
No, that's not scarce. That's infinite with AI. What scarce resources do you have? Do you possess?
Bitcoin.
Yeah. What's the other one?
But I lost it all in a boating accident.
Yeah, well, we can get some more. What's the other scarce resource that you own? It's your time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Your time is a scarce resource. The time you have, you've got likely more than me. I might have another 30 years. Hopefully you've got 60, 70, right? So the real altruism could be giving money to people, but a real altruistic life now would be using your time to help as many people as possible to see this and create a better life for themselves outside of this. And so that's not selfish. Taking your time and being altruistic with it is an incredible and beautiful thing you can do. We tried it. We just played the game wrong locally. So that's the positive side. We're going to be altruistic with our time. We should start a Bitcoin podcast. I think it might work. Huh?
I can never get my yacht
You don't want your
without
fucking
being
yacht.
evil.
It's the cigarette.
Yeah, cool.
Getting the yacht through being part of this dirty bullshit is just not worth it. None of it. This is the thing about money, right? It's like my thesis of money is very simple. It's like you don't want to be broke because that sucks, right? If you have to, but you don't need a lot to be happy. Debt free, owning a property somewhere, and being able to afford your shop and have a holiday. You don't need a lot. Chasing the yacht. How many miserable rich people are there? Loads of them. P. Diddy wasn't happy. He had to have all his weird parties, and he's still not happy. He's in jail. Like, having loads of money doesn't really make you happy.
I do think there is something in that ignorance is bliss.
Where do I always say my happiest time was? My happiest year.
When you were running?
When I was running. I stopped work for a year. Just went running for a year.
Yeah.
Like proper Forrest Gump, nearly every day. I would run 10 kilometers nearly every day and a half marathon a week. And I'd listen to books and I'd meditate. And I was thin. I was a lot thinner than I am now. I was fucking great. I was so happy. It's the happiest time of my life. Money didn't do that. It's putting on a pair of trainers every day and having no bullshit commitments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a chat on the way home.
What kickstart to 26?
It's good, man. This is one of these shows that feels negative, but certainly positive.
Yeah, as I said, it is a self-reflective thing because the fall of this empire, which is fundamentally captured by evil, is the opportunity for other regions to rise. And they remember what we're experiencing now. For centuries, those same tactics have been used all around the world, and now they're just coming home.
Sure, but do you know what the really interesting thing about this is if in connecting the dots, you've connected dots that don't exist, and say you're wrong. Say you were wrong about 9/11 and the war in Ukraine, Russia. What's happening is happening anyway, okay? And even if you are wrong, the choices that you can make to lead a happy and fruitful and prosperous life are still the same. Because even if, say you were wrong, it's still good to buy local. It's still good to go to the farmer. It's still good to not be part of the banking system. It's still good not to spend your entire life in the rat race, which is, everyone knows is miserable. It's still good to spend time with your family and go for walks and touch grass and sun your balls. All that stuff is still fucking good. And so whether you're right or wrong, it kind of doesn't matter because that is the answer for a happier life, I think.
Yeah, completely agree.
Chasing the money is not. It's a myth. It's a scam. As long as you get over the basic hurdles, we're gonna have a fun journey home, aren't we, Con? Simon, thank you for doing this. I think I could see us doing something again very soon.
Yeah,
I could see us doing. There's lots to think about here, man.
Okay,
we should definitely do a Bitcoin podcast. That'd be a good idea. All right, Simon, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening. See you soon.
Thank you.